Hello, everyone, Madi here. I recently saw this video from GiBi, where he defends Willcares, who I consider the biggest demon in FNAF, in my opinion. I hate this theory, to be honest. Besides, it's super outdated. It made sense at one point, but over time, it stopped making sense. And that's what I'm going to explain. Willcare isn't canon.
Willcare is a FNAF theory that claims William Afton cares about his children. There are some variations that GiBi mentioned in his video, but both fall under the umbrella term Willcare, Will loves, Will twisted care. Any of those names would fit Willcare. Well, I hate to say it, but GiBi is wrong. If William cares, but not in the conventional way, then he doesn't care. If he cares for his children, as if they were objects, he doesn't care, because that's not caring. All other variants are not included, because they are different things in a certain way. Will twisted care does not equal Willcare. Will love fits into Willcare, but the others don't. Not believing in Willcare doesn't mean believing in willed spice. The idea of William hating his children doesn't make sense, because his actions contradict that, but it doesn't mean he loves or cares about them. The most commonly used version, which is Willcare, and not other variants of the theory, is generally told this way. William committed the murders because of the death of his children, Elizabeth and Crying Child. In this version, after the death of Crying Child, following BV first, William killed Charlotte and Emily, and began making the Funtime animatronics, whose function everyone already knows. Or according to Elisa first, after the death of his daughters, William began to become a bad person. He killed Charlotte after the death of Crying Child. And because he was devastated by the death of his two children, the events of MCI and DCI occurred. The order of events is always the same. Death of the children, murders, etc. Two other factors used are the fact that the Fredbear plush toy communicates with the Crying Child, and the fact that William tries to keep Elizabeth away from Circus Baby. And we also have, I will put you back together. In the most recent evidence, which we saw in Secret of the Mimic, we have the Flower family, which is certainly a parallel to Afton's. We have this family with 5 flowers, which represent William, Mrs. Afton, Michael, the Crying Child, and Elizabeth. We have this part where the youngest son is in the hospital, and behind him is the father. The puppy on the table would represent the Fredbear plush toy. Furthermore, we have Will Speaker, which was confirmed with FNAF's sister location. All of this is evidence that is most commonly used for Willcare, and the time has come to refute them. First, William Afton is a narcissist and has psychopathic traits, just like every fictional serial killer. And the fact that he's a narcissist gives us an idea of what his relationship with his children would be like. Let's use the dynamics of the narcissist's children. We have the scapegoat child, the golden child, and the invisible child. The scapegoat child is the child unjustly blamed for problems, frustrations, and dynamic failures. In this case, it would be Michael Afton for being the older child. Elizabeth, the golden child, who is considered the perfect, exemplary daughter, receives privileges, but she cannot make mistakes, which makes her dependent on William's approval and in need of attention. The Crying Child, the invisible child, who is usually the most neglected, always left aside. And then we have William Afton, who controls all of this. In public, he tries to keep up appearances, seeming like a decent man, but at home, he reveals himself to be a different person, as we see in the books and in the Midnight Motorist minigame. His dynamic with his children can vary. For those who believe in Elisa first, I believe she was the golden child, and after her death, the golden child became the Crying Child. For those who believe in BV first, he may have been the golden child, and after his death, the golden child became Elizabeth. It depends a lot on your interpretation. My goal here isn't to dictate whether it's Elisa first or BV first. That largely depends on your beliefs. I honestly believe in Elisa first, but that doesn't change the facts I'm presenting about William Afton. The first piece of evidence for what I said is the fact that William is never home. You could say that he at least uses Fredbear to take care of his son, but I don't think so. I see Fredbear more as a sick game. He's always observing everything that happens, but never doing anything about it, as if he's amused by what's occurring, or sees it merely as an experiment that needs to be monitored. If he cared, he would be doing something to stop Michael from tormenting his younger brother, but evidently he doesn't. This consolation he tries to offer seems more like a way to maintain control than genuine care. Crying Child, being the golden child, at least receives the privilege of always being comforted by his only friend. we can conclude that William's treatment is different from that of other narcissistic parents. What William has in mind in this case is his favorite experiment. He doesn't see his children as humans, but rather as objects. Because William is a narcissistic psychopath, the treatment would be different than the treatment of a purely narcissistic individual. Crying child might be easier to manipulate, and it would be easier for William to expand another version of himself using him. In this case, as we see it, he would be trying to gain the crying child's trust, in a way, so he could use him. He would be looking for a replacement for his old toy. He would choose between Elizabeth and crying child, because they are children, and lack the critical thinking skills to recognize his manipulations. The cycle of abuse continues among the children. Their roles can be reversed the moment they commit a transgression that destroys William's ego. This is what causes Elizabeth to constantly seek approval while alive. And we see in the movie that William uses the issue of favoritism or status to manipulate his children. In Vanessa's case, it could be said that the movie are not canonical, but they can serve as parallels, or to fill in some gaps, as you prefer. Following Mika Runaway's perspective, to solve the Midnight Motorist minigame, we can get more conclusions about how William acts towards his family. Do I need to explain why the person who ran away isn't a crying child? Well, I honestly don't need to explain the obvious. The crying child is a child, and wouldn't run away like that, besides this evidence here. But let's ignore all that, and focus on these dialogues, which appear. This shows that William tends to be an authoritarian person, and when drunk, he tends to be more aggressive, because what we see indicates that he has problems with alcohol. And also, if it was Michael who ran away, it's because he can't stand his father, or something like that. This minigame, despite being confusing, might show us some things about William Afton and his relationship with his family. What we know about him is rather vague, and we're left to theorize, because even in the FNAF 2 movie, we didn't get enough information, which only generates more questions. Even more so, because the movie doesn't follow the original timeline, which makes interpretation difficult. But to fit it into the games, we can use the technique of parallels. Combining my theory with the evidence we have, we can conclude that Willcare doesn't make sense, right? But GiBi, in his video, said that all variants of this theory are Willcare. But I don't think so, and I'll explain why. Reason. Even if it's distorted, it's not caring, because that's not the definition of caring. Will-twisted care is also wrong, because I highly doubt that William thinks what he's doing is caring, because he consciously seems to know that he only cares about himself. That's the most idiotic and simplistic one. Not caring isn't synonymous with hating. Will objects, this fits best with the basis I explained, because, with what we see, and what I explained, it's clear that William doesn't see his children as human beings, but rather as experiments or objects. This doesn't mean he cares, because he will use the children when necessary. He only cares about himself. My goal in this video was simply to clarify why Willcare only made sense before the release of the fourth closet, where the little we had in the games fit with the initial idea I explained. I don't intend to attack anyone, I just wanted to point out a fact that the Five Nights at Freddy's community insists on denying. Guys, a villain doesn't need a reason to do what he does. Don't try to justify William's actions, because apparently, he does it because he wants to, and that's not synonymous with bad storytelling. On the contrary, I find it more interesting that William does it because he wants to, rather than out of suffering, and that's it. Guys, Madi out.